Hi, I'm Bill from CJ Pony Parts. With the Bowling Green race right around the corner, we've been doing a lot of work on Project Krimpstang to try to get it done before our deadline. Last time out on video, we showed you the McLeod clutch, McLeod flywheel, and our QuickTime bell housing. Since then, we've reinstalled the engine in the car and hung our BBK headers, TKO transmission, along with a Ford Performance aluminum drive shaft. The next step in the process is one a lot of you have asked about, and that is the wiring. At this point, I do have a little bit of a confession to make. We originally started this process, I was using a 2015 crate engine. Unfortunately, the 15 engine is not allowed in the NMRA factory stock class, so I just switched to an older style engine. The control pack shown here is for the 15. And what we're going to do is show you this control pack, how it works, and then show you some of the wiring on the car. Even though it's the older pack, the process is still the same. In case you're not familiar, the point of the control pack from Ford Performance is to give you everything you need to get the Coyote running no matter what your car you're putting in. As long as you have a return style fuel system with a Leith 155 liter per hour pump and 55 psi of pressure, this will get you the parts you need to make the engine run. It includes all the cold air intake parts from the factory setup, all necessary wiring, along with a computer, throttle, oxygen sensors, switches, and even radiator hoses. This is the factory cold air intake kit off the 2015 through 2017 Mustang GT, and it's included in the control pack kit. Now, depending on your application, you may or not be able to use all these components, but you're definitely going to use some of them, and one in particular, that is the mass air sensor. Whether you're running the factory air box or an aftermarket intake, this is the most important part of these pieces because you will need this to make the car run properly. The kit includes 2 oxygen sensors which will have to be used to make the car run properly, an original throttle pedal off the 2015 because it is a throttle by wire system, so if you have an older style throttle it's not going to work. They also include a Pcv hose along with the original style radiator hoses. Now again, you may not be able to use all these components. The sensors absolutely have to be used. Again, the same for the throttle. As far as these hoses go, this one more than likely you will use, but you might go with an oil separator or a different style setup. And on the radiator hoses for my personal car, I found the top hose will fit with a factory style 96 radiator. The bottom hose does fit as well. All I had to do was cut in the middle and extend it to get it to work. With Krimpstang having a roll bar and fixed mount racing seats, getting up under the dash to show you a lot of the connections is simply not going to happen with a camera. So what we did instead is we brought a Coyote engine here. This is a 2015 engine, and this is the entire control pack laid out. What we're going to do is show you all the connections step by step, then show you a few of them actually on the car when we're finished. This is the engine harness that's included on your Coyote Crate engine. This is already plugged in and ready to go. What you're going to do, it's a large one here, it's plugged in the computer. Lock it down with the gray receiver. And the other plug here plugs to the main inline plug on the harness. Then you need to take the main harness from the control pack, and that goes into the other side of the PCM here. You get that and lock it down. I should mention the PCM is going to mount under the hood. That's where it mounts on the factory 15 through 17. It's perfectly fine to do that with this as well. As far as the wiring that's included in the control pack, that'll make it the easiest way to get everything connected. Now we're going to work our way across the harness and explain what all these fittings are. Depending on your application, a lot of these you may not even use. If it's a race car, you're going to skip a lot of them. If it's a full street car with all accessories, then you'll need to use every plug here. We'll start with this extension harness here. You have your AC clutch and AC pressure plugs. If you're not running air conditioning, these get skipped. If you are running an air conditioning system, these are what control the AC and allow the computer to know you're using it. The other 2 things on here, you have your starter lead and you have the wire for your cooling fan. The next step is going to be the fuse and relay box. Again, same setup you're going to find in a brand new Mustang. All your fuses and everything are going to be right here. Then out of here, you go over to the power harness. And then Ford provides all the power wire you need to connect everything to make it run. So your main power and ground are here. And not only do they include everything you need, everything is pre-terminated, making it for a much easier installation. This is going to be your other underhood harness here. This is going to be your mass air sensor, which again plugs into that sensor I showed you on the cold air kit, the initial part. This will be your alternator. This will plug right into a factory 11 and up style alternator. If you're running a different alternator, you will have to cut the plug, but if you do run that style, it's a plug and play installation. The last one here is for your intercooler pump. Now the only reason you're going to use this, if you installed a Roush Ford Racing supercharger that has a factory intercooler pump, you would use this to power that pump. If you're not running a supercharger, this will be a plug that does not get used. Now moving on to the dash, this plug here is going to plug into the included throttle pedal assembly. Just lock that on. And these are the rest of the connections for underneath the dash. Anything you see with a GD number like this is a ground. Simply gets grounded to bare metal. These are your clutch switch assemblies. What these are going to do is make sure the clutch is engaged for the car to start. These aren't connected and these don't plunge in properly, the car won't start. That's a safety feature to make sure you don't start the car in gear, just like you'd find on a modern car. The last under dash plug is your OBD2 port. This is where you're going to plug in your OBD2 scanner, your tuner, anything like that. Again, this is something that would be found on a new car under the dash. You want to mount this under the dash somewhere easily accessible, so if you have to scan the car or tune the car, it's easy to get to. Up until this point, everything I showed you is going to be plug and play using basically factory forward connectors or simple power and ground hookups using ring terminals. There's nothing really fancy there. This though, this is the trickiest part of the installation, only because this is where you're getting all the signals that the computer needs to do its job. This looks a little intimidating at first. What you want to do is start by taking out the plugs that we're not using for our application or for most applications. That's going to be this one here. These are the CAN bus wires. We're not going to use those right now. Anything that says auxiliary, we don't need. So there's auxiliary 1, there's auxiliary 3. You push them aside. There's another auxiliary plug. We don't need that right now. These again are for future accessories. They're not needed when you install the system to get the car running. Okay, what we have left here, these are what we're going to actually need to connect. And what I'll do is I'll go through each one of these one at a time and explain what they do and what you're going to connect them to. We'll start with the basics, which are going to be these three here. If you've ever hooked up a car stereo, these will be very, very simple to you. Hat B, this is constant 12-volt power. So this has to go to a 12-volt direct 12-volt source. Key on is going to be switched power. Again, just like a car stereo, you have a constant and a switched. And the black is going to be our chassis ground. So those three, again, pretty simple. Something you should be able to handle if you've ever done a basic installation of lighting, car stereos, anything like that. These are going to be three simple connections. I'll push them aside, and now we'll go through the rest of the wires here. AC request. Again, this is a wire. You're only going to use this if you have an AC system. This is going to be a 12-volt source, basically letting the air conditioning, letting the car know the air conditioning is turning on so it can compensate with idle and everything else. And these four, we'll actually leave these for the end. This is your MIL light. This is going to go out to the included check engine light on your dash, just like a modern car with a check engine light. This includes a lamp. This goes to that, runs 12 volts to that light in case there is an issue with the computer. All right, now the last three, these are the ones you need basically to get the car running. These are going to be the important wires. Fuel pump relay out, this is going to connect to a positive lead on your fuel pump. What this is going to do is this will turn your pump on when the computer receives power. Now this is going to go again to a positive lead on the pump, and when the key is on, the pump will run all the time. I know on some cars you turn the key, you'll hear the pump cycle on and off, then it shuts off. Not in this case. When you turn the key on, anytime the key's on, this is going to make sure the pump turns on. And again, we tap this into Krimpstang. I'll show you where we made the connection to give you an idea where you want to look for that plug if you're working on a, say, 94 to 04 car. The last two are going to be the ignition triggers. Basically, one is an ignition and one is a starter request. Now the difference here, what these are going to do, these are going to tap into two wires at your ignition switch. You need an ignition switch 12-volt source that not only turns on when the key goes forward, but also stays 12 volts when the car is cranking or the car won't crank. Again, I'll get a little more detail about these two wires because these are the two that are the most common problem when people are installing this system. I'm going to go back to the ignition trigger here, the light green wire. This has to be hooked up to 12 volts that get a constant 12-volt source though when the car is cranking and in the run position. So a lot of times when you crank the car, the 12-volt source is shut off. That won't work. You have to find that hot wire in your ignition column that is on when the car is in start mode and when it's actually cranking. If you have any issues with the car shutting off after launches or anything like that, this is usually the wire that's causing the problem. So it's imperative you get this one on the correct plug. The light blue is kind of the same idea, but not the same. This just needs to get starter motor request. So this needs to have connected to a point where you get 12 volts when the engine start is asked. So when the car goes to the start mode, this has to have 12 volts. Not necessarily when the run, but just when it goes to start to make sure the starter motor engages. So again, this one you need for start and run. This one, start only. Now here's how I connected the green wire. I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, the only way to do it. This is the way I did it because it works fine for what I'm choosing to do with my car. I tapped in the 12 volts going to my inertia switch. By doing that, it actually makes the inertia switch still work, so if the car would get in an accident, it's going to shut the fuel pump off. This basically goes through there and then out to power my fuel pump. Like I said, this is the 2014, the older style setup on my car, but the basic connections are all going to be the same. You can see here, this is the main harness going to the engine. That's a single plug there, then that goes there. Here's our orange wire going over to power our fan. The one thing you want to make sure you're specific with this car, when you're running this kind of control pack and you're installing it, make sure you have good grounds. In a couple cases, I used factory grounds. Other cases, I ground down to bare metal to make a good ground. But if you're going to have an issue with it, grounds can cause problems. And there are quite a few grounds on the system, so make sure your grounds are done properly. It'll make it go a lot easier. And once you have all the connections made, what you'll want to do then is go in the car, turn the key to the run position. You should hear the fuel pump turn right on. So like I said, the fuel pump is going to be constant. Anytime that key is turned on, the fuel pump is going to be on. Now, start the car up. When you open the control pack and lay it out, it might be intimidating. When you really look at it, it's not that bad to do. I mean, all these connections here are plug and play. You got a couple grounds to make, a couple power to connect. The only real wires you're going to work on are these here. There's only 6 connections you have to make to get the car running. So overall, it's not as bad as it looks and takes your time. It's something most people should be able to handle on their own. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss future updates on Project Krimpstang.